Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 10, Episode 112. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being here this Tuesday, Steelers. Dave, how you doing? Hope you had a good Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, nice and quiet. I don't know. You're a foodie, aren't you? Did you watch?
Oh, that's a little too much. A little too strong.
Okay.
I mean, enough, but I eat it. I can't make it.
Okay. Well, I do both, and they had a great series yesterday on the History Channel about. Oh, what do they call it? A history of, I forget the title of it, but it should be easy to look up. But it was fascinating. Tells some of the, of course, some of the history I already knew about the start of McDonald's and stuff like that. But, Kentucky Fried Chicken and Kellogg's and just really, really well done and entertaining. And I've got a lot of it. I obviously didn't get to watch all of it, but I got a lot of it taped or whatnot. So slowly.
The food that built America?
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic if you get a chance to watch that. There's not much stuff that interests me outside of sports, football particularly, but some stuff, if it's war related or history related or something like that, I definitely like. But that was definitely worth watching. I don't know if you're going to be able to catch that, set the DVR to tape that future showing or whatnot, or maybe view it online. But I think a lot of people would enjoy that. It was really good.
Did you say they covered McDonald's? What was the story with like Ray Kroc and wasn't there some sort of battle with ownership of McDonald's? Did it talk about that?
You haven't seen the movie that Michael Keaton? It's fairly.
If your sentence starts with "Have you seen the movie?" You know my answer is no.
Man, it's not too long ago. Ray, I forget the actual name of Ray.
I think Kroc. It was just a documentary on Ray Kroc.
No, it was actually no. Michael Keaton's starred in it, and they told the whole story of Ray Kroc and the McDonald brothers. Anyway, that was a really good movie. At least I thought it was. So I don't want to spoil it for you, but
you can.
But
but there was a dispute, right? There was some sort of issue with.
I don't remember exactly now. The finer details of it, but he was a milkshake salesman and came across the idea and then wanted to become kind of their director of franchising, and then eventually went to buy them out, and then. I think it was $2.7 million is what he bought the McDonald brothers out for, because they wanted $1 million each and $700,000 to go to Uncle Sam, and they also wanted to keep their original McDonald's store, which Ray Kroc agreed to, and then right after, I don't know how long it was after agreeing to it, he forced it. Being as how he didn't own the name, he made them change their own store's name.
Oh my God!
And anyway, that restaurant, I think held on for a little bit. Eventually went out, and I think Ray Kroc ended up buying that one. It's I hate to talk about food and fast food. Just open up this show, but I thought it was a very good series on the History Channel there.
Yeah, no more Steelers. We're done talking Steelers, Dave. We are pivoting to food.
We got it. Actually, Mike Tomlin's helped us out a lot. I mean, for an off season where nothing's going on with the coronavirus and all like that, we've actually had a lot to talk about so far. I've been a bit surprised.
Yeah, it hasn't been so bad so far. Fingers crossed. Tomlin was on Coffee with Cal, I think is the name of it. It's an interview show with Kentucky head coach John Calipari, Clarion alum, by the way, so from my neck of the woods. And there's a variety of topics, a lot of conversation there with Mike Tomlin. What I'm going to start with, though, is something that's a little more pressing in terms of the short-term future. Tomlin asked about what will happen with training camp. Obviously, a ton of uncertainty right now. No one has any answers, but Tomlin says the team is looking at all options for their training camp location. He says, quote, "We're looking at Saint Vincent, we're looking at Pittsburgh, and we're looking at some other undisclosed sites because obviously the safety and the protocol is first and foremost, and we've got to put these guys in the situation that best checks those boxes." So obviously, no decision's been made. Don't know when that decision is going to be made. It'll be based on maybe some information from the league, obviously information going on pandemic-wise, but very much up in the air where this team will practice in training camp this, assuming July and August.
Yeah, and look, here we are. A little less than probably 2 months out, right? Because you would expect with them if the Hall of Fame game goes on as on the date that is scheduled to, the Steelers would report to training camp a week or week and a half or so earlier than they normally do. So that would put it, I think, at around the 20th of July, and I think it was last year on
June 12th.
The 12th that we found out the schedule. Now, will we know the schedule by June the 12th or June the 15th this year? I don't know. I guess there's a possibility that we won't, because maybe there's still being some uncertainty there. But, they're going to have to firm up details either way, probably at least a month out. So,
yep.
Probably within the next or after the next 30 days, we should know. And I got a bad feel. I hope I'm wrong, Alex. I really do. But, they've been going to Saint Vincent here for over 50 years now. And I have a feeling that streak could be broken, this year. It would make sense. I understand how they could probably do the social distancing with the fans out there on such a sprawling complex,
right.
Out there at Latrobe. But, how do you keep the players safe? From the fans, there would be really probably they would have to not do the interaction,
right.
Which is
I think you could work it. Just no autographs, no one on the fence line. Players just do their thing, and they would be distanced from fans.
Yeah, that kind of defeats the whole purpose of the setting, though.
Not my purpose.
Well, not your purpose, but for a lot of people that
sure.
make the journey, and that would probably prevent a lot of that would probably result in a lot of people not going out there.
Sure.
Once the word gets around that would be the case there. But I mean, I think they could. If you closed off the bleachers or whatnot.
Right, just put them in the field.
Yeah, just put them in the field and say, look, we want you to social distance out there and all. I suppose that could be done. But if you're going to go that far with it, and maybe you want to prevent the players from having to travel and all, it would seem to make sense to have it at the team facility, right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's pros and cons each way. I think you could social distance people from a fan standpoint, from a player standpoint. There is a benefit to getting them all in one location where they basically can't leave or can't leave easily. That could help. But also on the downside, they're all going to be together, sandwiched in these dorm rooms, and someone gets sick, and now you got a big problem. So it might be better for them, obviously, to be with their families if they're at home. They're away. You have more distancing of the players while you're at home at Pittsburgh. You have maybe some other challenges. I don't know for sure exactly how it's going to go. I'm with you. I'm not incredibly optimistic. Obviously, is Saint Vincent College even going to be open for them to attend? I mean, there's that factor as well. A lot of colleges are slow opening up and that whole status. So I don't know which way this thing's going to go. My guess is kind of with you that they'd probably stay at Pittsburgh, either work at their Southside facility or even maybe do some practices at Heinz Field. They've done that in the past for training camp, so that's an option as well. We'll see. I'm with you. They can't make this decision on July 19th. It should come probably in a month or so. There has been some optimism, the landscape of the whole thing getting a little bit better pandemic-wise, but this may be the year the streak is broken, and they've been at St. Vincent since 1966, so it'll be different.
Yeah, most definitely. And once again, if there's ever been one thing I hope I'm wrong about, it's maybe that, because obviously, it would affect what we do and you being out there and all. But I mean, obviously, we would get past it. It's not the end of the world there. It would just put a lot of more emphasis on us really watching, the preseason games, assuming those even go off, as playing there. But boy, this offseason certainly has sucked, hasn't it? Far from didn't get to really participate in the pre-draft, in the Steelers kind of pre-draft process, and get to follow them around to the pro days and obviously the pre-draft visits, and then now you fast forward and it looks like training camp might not be the normal training camp. So one other thing to be kind of disappointed about this offseason, thanks to the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, I don't mean to get myself all depressed here on a Tuesday. So let's transition to something else that Tomlin talked about, something that Tomlin was excited in talking about. Of course, talking with Coach Calipari, Kentucky guy, had to ask about Benny Snell, and Tomlin lit up whenever Coach Cal was asking about Benny Snell, and Tomlin said, quote, "Man, you're talking about competitors. Benny's a tough-minded kid. He's a competitor. I think that's the thing that attracted me to him when he was down there doing it for your Wildcats." And so I think, as I said, Dave, Snell's the one guy that I think Tomlin and the coaching staff likes a whole lot more than what the fan base either likes or what they realize how much the coaching staff likes this guy, because he's a competitor, as Tomlin mentioned, and B, he's a workhorse type of back, and Tomlin's all about the feature back mentality.
Yeah, and look, I mean, he's a power back. He, just in kind of the same mold as James Conner. I thought for the most part, Benny Snell had performed well during his rookie season when given the opportunity to do so. My only really complaint is maybe there was a couple of games in there they should have kind of stuck with him and let him kind of be the guy instead of trying a few other guys, mix up the rotation there. But as a whole, I thought for a rookie, he performed well. He'll obviously be the I think the primary power backup to James Conner entering the season here. And obviously, if Conner injury history stays to form or whatnot, you would think that he'd be the next guy up. And I think kind of regardless, I think Benny Snell's at least in line for 100 touches. At a minimum, I kind of view that as probably his floor for 2020, and then obviously depending on James Conner and what's going on there, it could go up from there. But that plays kind of back into what we talked about most of the pre-draft process there about, look, we think they like their backs a little bit more than what most on the outside do, especially for the crowd that was calling for this team to draft a running back. With their first pick, which was in the second round, or even their second pick, later in the third round there. Now, while they did end up drafting Anthony Mcfarland Jr. In the fourth, I think everybody knows by now he's a completely different back. And after a long breakdown of his film and all like that, I see why they did it, and I like the player overall there. So the only really kind of thing left over from that is still, could it have been a different position like defensive tackle or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they're down on Benny Snell at all. Look, I mean, he missed a couple 3 games last season because of the meniscus tear or whatever that he had to get fixed there, and he rebounded fairly quickly from that. Looking at a couple of off-season photos, it looks like he's going to be another one of those running backs that maybe comes in a little bit more, more trim than he was his rookie season.
Oh, has
he?
Well. I haven't even seen a photo. Has he looked lighter?
Just it's hard to tell, with some of these things. But someone pointed that out to me, and it did look like he had a little bit less beef on him, but we'll see.
Well, Tomlin gave his kind of boilerplate, but still very Tomlin remark about second-year guys. And Tomlin said, quote, "You know how it is. You've been a lap around the track. You kind of know how the ground is laid. He had some contribution to us a year ago, and it's reasonable to expect him to just continue to take off and be a big-time guy for us." End quote. So, yeah, a lot of excitement for Snell. We've seen guys like Bell, and Connor, and Samuels drop weight their second year. I think it'd be wise for Snell to do the same, lose 5 to 10 pounds, get a little bit quicker, a little more explosive, still keeping that power, still going to be a big back type. And again, I think he has the baseline qualities his team looks for.
You got a lot of guys, every year Mike Tomlin goes in, usually into training camps, ask about he either comments on them or he's asked about, the second year players and expecting the kind of jump, that he expects from them, in year 2. Look, Deontay Johnson is an obvious one, right? Coming off of a good rookie season and really expect him to make a nice jump. And then you got the guys, and I put this up in a poll, and you tell me who you think got the most votes here. Which one of these second-year Steelers players will make the biggest jump in 2020? Justin Lane, Benny Snell Jr., Isaiah Buggs, and UG3, Ulysses Gilbert III.
I think I voted in this one.
Okay.
I think any of the bottom 3, I think anything could be a good option. I think I voted for UG3 just because I've been talking about how high I am on him. And again, the plays he made last year, even through that back injury, now healthy, I think that's going to be big for him. I think all guys are expected to make a jump, but I'll go UG3. Yeah,
UG3, let's see, there's still 4 days left on that vote, but he's gotten 42.4% of the vote out of over 1,500 votes on that. Benny Snell Jr. In second, 31.1%. Isaiah Buggs next, 15.6%, and Justin Lane brings up the rear at 10.9%. I don't think that's overly surprising based on the current cornerback depth chart with the team. I fully expected him.
Who would you go with?
Probably UG3, just because you would expect Connor to, if he stays healthy, to get the lion's share of the work there. Whereas the path of UG3, I think, to become maybe a bigger contributor, to make the biggest jump overall, I think the path sets up for him better there. But look, I mean, Connor, if Connor struggles or if Connor has another one of those acute injuries, I mean, Benny Snell would slide right into the driver's seat in there. But yeah, look, I mean, I think they'd like him. I think, like I said, I view his floor as being 100 total touches in 2020.
Yeah, I think there'll be some, even if Connor's healthy, an effort to work him in a little bit. I still think they're going to go with Connor kind of being the guy, but obviously there'll be rotation and rest, and when Connor needs a couple plays off to catch his breath. So yeah, I think that Snell, is he ever going to be the absolute clear-cut starter? I mean, I don't know. I'm not super confident in that. But
we could find out next year at this time. Yeah. If Connor's gone, we could find out.
That goes back to the discussion of, assuming this is Connor's last year, how does the team approach the running back situation in the 2021 draft? Do they roll with Mcfarland and Snell? Obviously, part of it's going to be based on how those guys do this year, but it'd be very interesting and very telling about how they feel about those two guys based on what moves they make a little less than a year from now.
That's to be determined, I think. I think it's too hard to kind of speculate about that where we sit right now.
But for now, excited for Snell, excited for the running back room. What else did Tomlin say that kind of caught your eye, Dave?
Oh, let's see. We hit on the training camp stuff. We hit on what else did we hit on? We hit on the Snell stuff. I'm trying to go through my head here and what the topics were overall with him. Help me out here.
He talked about with the quarterback situation. He was asked about to comment on how he dealt with the roulette game of quarterbacks, and Tomlin said, "quote I was just trying to get out of each and every stadium every week with a win." Basically, that was mentality, probably the right mentality to have. So yes, having Ben back will obviously improve play, but create a whole lot more stability and maybe ability to look a little bit longer term in this season, as opposed to last year where it really was just let's just deal with the next day kind of process.
Yeah, and that kind of you jog my memory now too. And then talking about, and I wrote this up, I should have remembered it. We already talked about the coronavirus impact and all. I thought, boy, that guy can answer questions like only he can answer questions, right?
He's very good in just those. Gets his, whenever he's talking with a coach, current or former, just like he's in his element. Dungy, Calipari, just a different type. He kind of opens up a little bit.
Boy, he can give some responses right off the cuff too. He was asked by Calipari, about the possibility of there not being fans at sporting events and his thoughts on that and potential impact and yada yada. He goes, I think the thing that I'm interested in is how it changes the game, maybe mechanically in some ways, communication. The ability to hear communication, whether it's player to player within a team or the opposing team. I think there's going to be some interesting elements of the discussion if we end up in that area, just in terms of the communication end and the information you're able to gain and how you're able to use it is going to be an interesting element of it. Later on, he goes to say, and then also obviously the emotional element of what fans provide in terms of inspiration in those big moments. And he goes on to even give an example of how fans are so integrated into moments in the game. He says, you got third down and goal on the 3-yard line in a significant moment. Part of the moment is everybody on their feet and leaning in and the atmosphere that it creates. So that's going to be interesting. He says he does not have a sense of kind of what that's going to feel like or how it's going to change those moments, but he's spending a lot of time just talking about mechanically from a coach's perspective. So, hey, kudos to him talking about, maybe some of the intricacies of little things that he goes on to even make another reference that I have quoted here on the article on SteelersDepot.com. If we're making audibles offensively and the defense is capable of hearing those audibles, what does that mean? Or you have an offense and you're in a hostile environments, and oftentimes you can't communicate, and in the environment you might have an opportunity too. So what does that provide you? In other words, you have an opportunity to communicate maybe in an instance where you'd be using an audible, what does that look like? So just, I think he kind of centered a lot of his responses around, the communication aspect, potentially related to what not having fans in the stadium would look like. But once again, got 3 paragraphs of an answer out of Tomlin, out of a question that you probably thought, maybe he just wiped that off a little bit.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a great point. There's the element of the emotional aspect, the stuff that you and I are going to recognize whenever we're watching the game, but then there's the coaching aspect, the football aspect of the things Tomlin talks about, being able to hear every communication that goes on offense and defense, and that chess match that's going to have to be created because there's really no transparency, I guess you could say. There is transparency, and there's no hiding kind of that information because of the crowd noise, and there's advantages and disadvantages, but of course each team has to deal with that. So as Tomlin talks about, it's a level playing field, things are fair, because that's something that every club is going to have to wrestle with and adjust to.
Yeah, and what did he have to say about Randy?
He's getting on the train. He's on the Randy Fichtner train, if you hear it in the background there. Yeah, that's an article I kind of wrote just because, Steelers Nation I thought might get a little riled up for this one, but talked about their history with Fichtner and quote, being in this coaching profession, personalities like his, tireless workers, you can't have enough Randy Fichtners. That was the easiest phone call I've ever made in reference to hiring him back in 2007. And I'm sure some fans would disagree with the quote, you can't have enough Randy Fichtners.
I thought just overall, I thought Calipari had an interesting story mixed in there. I don't know if you watched the whole interview or not, but once again, gave us a little bit to talk about here during a time of the year where normally we wouldn't have a lot to talk about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with Fichtner, I mean, overall, it's been a good coaching hire. I know that's probably some people are going to get mad at me for saying that, but this guy's been here since 2007. He's been a receivers coach, quarterbacks coach. I mean, just the fact that longevity exists, and the guy's done well in those individual position coach roles. But it's not like it was a bad hire. OC is still debatable. Had a pretty good 2018 the first year, had a lot of talent. Last year didn't have a lot of talent, and things went to crap. But so that makes 2020 kind of a maybe tiebreaker type year for him. But I don't want to say that Fichtner was a terrible hire. It was a good hire because this dude's been here for a long time, and as a quarterback coach, as a receivers coach, relationship with Ben, I mean, those things have all been positive.
There you go.
All right, that was probably about it from Tomlin. Anything else I'm missing? You want to move on here, Dave?
Yeah, I think that was about it from Mike Tomlin. He did talk about how he thinks college players could potentially be paid, right, or should be paid, and then he went. He was asked quite a bit about, or at least a little bit about, the Rooney Rule incentivification, or incentive. Give me that word.
Incentivizing?
Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm. And I think Matthew Marksey wrote that up for us this morning on the site.
Yeah, basically Tomlin's thoughts is, he's comfortable with. I shouldn't say comfortable. He's fine with paying the players, but he wants to make sure they get educated and they're handling that money responsibly, which I'm all in favor of. But I think more to the point, you got to pay the players first, and then I don't want to say that the lack of education is the reason why you can't pay the players. I want to pay the players personally, but I think Tomlin generally is on the same page as most of the public. And he said he's open to the idea of at least talking about the incentives for the Rooney Rule and all the things that have been proposed. And he's not 100% on board with it, but he likes just it's creating this discussion because he knows there's a problem with lack of minorities being hired in the NFL, and he wants to try to fix it. So he's kind of all for any solution that will accomplish that.
There you go.
All right, from Mike Tomlin to Mike Clay of ESPN. He has offered his 2020 NFL projections for the Pittsburgh Steelers and for the entire NFL. It's a real labor of love there, so kudos to Mike Clay for going through all of this. Of course, he's not going to get everything 100% right, at least in our estimation, but for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you can check it out on Steelers Depot. You can see the link to the file that he has. It's probably easier to look along as opposed to just listening to us. But for Ben, here's how Mike Clay projects Ben's 2020 season. 3,820 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 26 sacks in 14 games played. And that seems a little on the conservative side, but it's not. I think it's not a terrible projection.
The first thing I went to was what do those numbers equate to for his adjusted net yards per passing attempt number. Now, obviously, I didn't have the sack yardage to work with, only the sack total. How does that sack total feel to you?
In terms of him taking 26 sacks?
Yeah.
That feels a little on the higher end of things. I don't know. I have to look at the numbers the last few years. I think it's been more low 20s than mid 20s.
Yeah, I the first thing that jumped out to me was that was maybe a little bit high there, but regardless, I mean, it comes out to a adjusted net yards per passing attempt number of almost or right around 6.5, and that's actually would be lower than Ben's career average in that number, which I think is around 6.7 or so. So, I thought it was okay with the projections on Ben. He does have him only playing in 14 games, though. So hopefully one of those games Ben's taken off because, they have things wrapped up there, and it's not because of injury, but obviously he has him missing 2 games there. And I guess that's kind of understandable there. But here's to hoping that Ben obviously makes it through a full season. I think you and I talked about, anywhere between probably 3,800 to 4,200, 4,500 yards for Ben in 2020.
I just hope those touchdowns get a little closer to 30 than the mid-20s, as he has projected at 25. With the run game, he also has James Conner missing some games. He does have him as the leading rusher for the Steelers, 721 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns in 13 games to go along with 37 receptions. So that would be just kind of not a bad year for Conner, but just one of those probably that's going to, we would sit there and say it would have been better had he stayed healthy.
Right.
So he's got
for 207 total touches, right?
Yeah, 207. So that's kind of what you've been saying for a while now, hasn't it? Yeah.
Right. I kind of figured that might be a good kind of over/under number to play with there with him. Mm-hmm. So.
Interestingly, he's got Anthony Mcfarland as the second leader in carries and yards with 368 yards. Benny Snell kind of taking more of a backseat role, which is 73 carries for 297 yards. So if Mcfarland can make some big plays, I mean, this guy, again, making a transition, easiest position to transition to, especially given the landscape of the lack of an offseason. There's a chance for him to kind of, stake that claim and make an impact right away.
I guess, still 100 touches for Mcfarland feels a little strong, doesn't it?
Yeah, what was the number we had? Around 75? I think I said 75 to 100, but I said that was total touches, including kick return games. So in terms of just carries and receptions, 100 feels a little on the high end.
Yeah, that feels something maybe injury related.
I guess in this projection, he's got Conner missing 3 games. So
right, I guess it's possible. It just feels a little strong. Look, and if he gets out there and he'll if he gets out there and gets a chance and delivers some big plays right out of the chute, then it probably will lead to a few more touches with him during his rookie season. But on the flip side, to get 100 touches, how many snaps would he have to play?
Yeah, that's a good question. 350 snaps, 400 snaps, something like that. I don't know.
And that's a third of almost a third of the snaps, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think the number is? I don't think about it in that relationship.
Let's just say that he got a touch every. I guess every third. Because if he got to touch every other carry, he'd be wearing the Drew Archer red light. At that point. Yeah, to hit those kind of numbers, 100 touches, you would think he'd have to play around 300 snaps. Yeah,
but if Conner misses time, then there's going to be kind of a big, just hodgepodge of guys like it was last year. So we'll see. What's the average on that? Is yards per carry? I didn't even look that up. Let me look here. It looks like 4.1. So hopefully be a little better than that with some maybe explosive plays he could offer.
Yeah, you'd hope he'd have some home runs in there,
Mm-hmm. With the receivers, maybe a little down here again because Ben's numbers were, to me at least, a little conservative. The receivers' numbers get conservative as well. Juju, I guess you could call it a semi-bounce back year. Clay's projecting Juju to have 80 receptions, 1,027 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I'll take the receptions and the touchdowns. I'd like some more yards out of that, though.
Yeah, I just thought overall it feels a little bit light with the receivers overall in a couple areas there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially Deontay. Deontay has basically the same numbers he put up last year: 66 receptions, 780 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I think he's going to do much better than that this year.
And with Juju, if Juju hit exactly those numbers, probably wouldn't lead to the franchise tag, would it? Or would it?
It's hard to look at this number alone, but it would not make me immediately say you have to franchise tag this guy.
Deontay, you would hope those numbers would be a lot, like you said, a lot more than 66. It feels like he's sliding James Washington a little bit in favor of Claypool. There, I think it's going to be for Claypool to get 31 receptions. Once again, how many plays would he have to be on the field for?
Right, 200,
at least 200. You would think, and I think even 200 would be generous to get that kind of those kind of numbers there.
I guess he'd be more of a package player where there'd be maybe more of an effort to get him the ball because he's playing in situations where he's designed to get the ball.
Right.
But still, point taken.
And it kind of feels between, even though they play two different type of positions, obviously in Claypool and Eric Ebron, you could see those guys kind of being used similarly, in the offense and situationally as well too. And he's got Eric Ebron, 43 receptions and Claypool at 31. I mean, that's a whole nother receiver. I get probably how he came up with those numbers. I just think it's a little strong total overall. I will be surprised if Eric Ebron hits 43 receptions, and just as surprised if Claypool hits 31 receptions. I think a couple of those need to be taken off their plate and maybe spread out to guys like Juju and Deontay.
What do you think is the realistic reception number for both those guys, Claypool and Ebron, if it's not 31 for Claypool and 43 for Ebron?
People ain't gonna like to hear it, but I think if Claypool hits 20, I think that's I think he's done good.
Okay, and Ebron? Clay's projecting 43. You think that's a little rich? You think
probably 30? Yeah, 30 to 35. Yeah, I would put that in there, and that's assuming you keep Vance right around the 23 or 25 mark,
which would feel low for Vance. I mean, the 23 receptions feels low. I know he's going to be splitting some more time this year, but I hope he has more than 23 receptions.
Well, who is most likely? Name me two guys with receptions on here that are mostly overshot.
I guess if you made me choose, I mean, I don't think Juju and Deontay certainly aren't overshot. And Washington with 35 receptions, that's probably conservative. So I think I'd have to be with you because we're really just kind of process elimination. Claypool and Ebron probably a little on the high end.
Right. That and who is the most criminally undershot?
I still think Vance is going to catch more than 23 passes, especially working under Clay's assumption he's going to play 14 games. So I would say Deontay and Vance.
Okay. And how did the total? What's he got? 93 total receptions by the running backs and fullback this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what's that? About almost a quarter or so, I guess, or a little short of. He's got Roethlisberger and Mason combining for 377 completions.
Yeah, that's should be right around. 24.7%.
All right, so it is a quarter. Okay.
Let's see. Elsewhere, he's got the offensive line a little interesting there. He's got a projection of Villanueva, Wisniewski, Pouncey, DeCastro, and Filer. Again, not impossible for Wisniewski to be the starting left guard. I just think it's a lot more likely Matt Filer's going to be that left guard with Banner or Chooks battling it out for the right tackle spot.
Yeah, and that's something we're going to be talking about for quite a while. Probably the left guard and starting right tackle position. So mm-hmm. I won't smite him for that prediction.
I will smite him, though, for the sack numbers for Pittsburgh. Defensively, he's projected this team to only have 45 total sacks, where this team's been hitting 50 easily, I think, for the last 3 straight years. TJ Watt projected to have just 11.5 sacks. Cam Hayward with just 6. I got some big problems with that one.
And even at that number, which I agree is criminally low based on what this team has done, and he still has that, if I'm reading his team stat rankings, his projected team stat rankings right, he's got the sacks at number 1 overall. So I would have to go through all of his, just to double check. And once again, all this info I've got it linked to on SteelersDepot.com in the ESPN stats post there. It goes to a full PDF where Mike Clay has done this for all 32 teams, something that I would not want to take the undertaking of doing here. Mm-hmm. And really the only reason we're giving this a lot of attention because I think he really does a good job on this overall. I mean, here we are picking out, being critical of certain points because that's what we're supposed to do on these things, either praise or be critical of, I think. But I think overall he does okay. But the fact that he's still got this team number 1 in sacks and only having 45, yeah, that does feel low. I mean, you would think at least 50, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've been over 50, I believe, for the last 3 years. They have the most sacks over the last 3 years, so it's smart to put them number 1. But I think 45 total is pretty low considering they haven't lost any key pass rushers sans Javon Hargrave.
And you would hope T.J. Watt have more than 11.4 sacks and Cameron Hayward more than 6.2 sacks. there. I don't know where is he missing here. Probably you could throw one or two more, hopefully on the plate of Devin Bush. So let's give Devin Bush another 1.5 there. Who else could use some sacks on this list? Watt, at least 2 more probably.
I mean, I hope he gets to 15. I mean, I could recreate my path to 60 sacks like I was doing last year if you want me to, but I just think they're going to at least touch 50.
I do as well too there. So I think the big takeaway, and he's got him. How many interceptions here? 13 total interceptions. He obviously doesn't have total takeaways listed on here. Overall, though, he likes this defense. I think if you look at his rankings, he's got this defense. I think number 1 overall in his league-wide projections. He's got the Steelers' offense ranked 13th overall, which I would be a little bit disappointed. I think I don't think people would have to worry about Randy. Maybe who knows? One more season if the offense finishes in the middle of the pack in 2020. There, ideally, you would hope that this is going to be a top 10. Right around at least top 10 or better offense with the return of Ben and how many times already this offseason we talked about how many of these guys are returning. I mean, this is going to be a veteran group from the most part here on both sides of football, and really on the defensive side of the football. And obviously the return of Ben should help the red zone. You got all these guys, most of these guys, starters on offense, returning as well on top of it there. So I think I go with this. I think this defense really has the ability, Alex, to beat tops in the league.
Sure.
Especially in a off season that's a virtual off season where I think the Steelers benefit from that as well too. I mean, I went down the list and put it on Twitter. The projected 53-man roster or projected defensive guys on a initial 53-man roster that could be carryovers from 2019, and there's like 20-something names on there. And then obviously you're going to have Highsmith join that group. Probably a guy like Antoine Brooks Jr., another draft pick, going to be on that list as well too. There's probably not going to be too many roster spots open. Obviously overall, but not especially on the defensive side of football, right?
Sure, yeah, not a lot of turnover, and as you said, in a year like this, I think that continuity is going to be really important. I love the continuity in the secondary because there's been so much turnover there trying to find the talent for a long time now, and for the first time in a long time, they basically have the same secondary in consecutive years, where it's going to be really important for them to hit the ground running right away as opposed to adding new guys, them getting, just comfortable with the system, integrated in the system, and then you can kind of expand the back half of the year. So a lot of excitement there, and in Clay's mind, it all adds up to a 10-win Steelers team. That's his projection of 10-6 Pittsburgh Steelers team.
Yeah, that's right up my alley there. Right up my annual. Look, and we talked about this a little bit on the live stream again, and it is something we're probably going to be asked every week, right? What do we think the Steelers' record will be in 2020? I think it starts at 10-6. I mean, I think the expectations should be 10-6 or better. From there. So much can go wrong on the injury front, and you try to predict these things way ahead of the season, how every game will go, and whether it be injuries or whatever, things don't work out that way. But I think 10 wins at a minimum should be the expectation out of this team. And obviously, if they win 10 games, you would think they're going to be in the playoffs.
Right, especially now that 7 teams can be in the playoffs. This was an 8-8 team last year with one of the worst offenses in football. So they were 8-5. They should have at least been 9 wins last year. So 10 wins minimum to me. Like I said, if Ben's healthy and the defense plays remotely close to what it did last year, that's 10 wins easily. And then anything else, you start tacking on 11, 12, and really making a hard charge for the AFC North crown with Baltimore.
Right.
All right, so that was Clay's projections. Again, good job to him for doing this for the entire league. I don't envy that.
What did you think about them overall? I didn't think they were bad. I mean, obviously undershot on some stuff, but good actually off-season kind of talking fodder this early out to have these kind of projections out there.
Yeah, I think Clay's been doing this for a couple years now, so kudos to him. Again, check on Steelers Depot. There's a link to the entire packet where you can see all the stats for yourself. Speaking of media, we're going to be a little less kind to this man and Pete Prisco for leaving off Micah Fitzpatrick off his top 100 list. Fitzpatrick and Cam Hayward responded with Brian McFadden on CBS Sports HQ. And Fitzpatrick just said he kind of laughed at it, but also used it as fuel and motivation to just remind himself to get better. And, if whatever a player, an athlete has to do and use this motivation, I'm cool with it. And Fitzpatrick's going to remember the Pete Prisco snub.
Yeah, it needs to put a picture of him up in the locker this year to think about that snub. Look, it was a clear snub, I think, and I think you brought it up on the live stream. What are the odds that he just forgot? It was
better than zero.
It was just a clear oversight, and instead of him saying, you know what, I was going down the list and I missed him. He doubled down on it. Right. Instead, you're talking about watch 3 games. The game against Los Angeles Chargers shows why he doesn't belong on this list. Yada yada. Look, you go back and watch that Chargers game. I hate to use the term almost interception, but that came on a great read by Minka out of a box coverage that they learned something on from earlier in the game, I thought, and kind of goaded Phillip Rivers into making that throw, thinking that it was going to be kind of a pitch and catch, almost like it was the first one, and that wasn't the case, and that was a very interceptable ball that Minka probably kicks himself for not making that play. I think it kind of got behind him there a little bit. I think he kind of overshot, had to kind of reach back or whatnot. But I mean, if he makes that interception in that game, to me, it really changes the complexion. I think he was targeted like 3 times, I think, in that game. And yeah, one of those times was deep downfield on what I think was intended to be an inverted coverage that somebody, I think, blew. Okay, mm-hmm. and yeah, it was an incompleted pass on that one in particular. I think no. What was that? Was that the one that was incompleted or completed down the left?
There was a blown coverage.
It wasn't. No? It wasn't a touchdown though. I can't remember if that was the long completed pass or the incompleted pass. But okay, yeah. Let's go.
I think that was on Mike Hilton, that play, not Fitzpatrick. If I'm remembering the play correctly.
I want to remember that way too. It was supposed to be an inverted that was on Mike Hilton's third, wasn't it?
I just remember Hilton didn't carry something vertical. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I covered that play, and I remember because some people thought it was on Minka. I'm like 90% sure it was on Hilton, that play.
I kind of referenced that, I think, somewhere in one of these posts or podcasts or tweets or whatever. But even if that was on Minka, I mean, yeah, you could count on 2 fingers probably the blown coverages that you point to him on. And look, blown coverages happen, and all. But trying to remember back, I don't think that game against the Chargers was as bad as what Pete Prisco was trying to make it out. I think he's just doubling down, and Pete trying to say, I checked with the NFL personnel around the league, and they backed up my claim that use whatever bias that you want to use in that to have confirmation there. I think anybody smart who paid attention to the Steelers enough last season knows that Minka belongs on the top 100 players for 2020.
Yeah. I don't know why you even have to say it. I mean, I think it's just that kind of obvious.
Here's something to talk about. Was David DeCastro a snub off that list?
Yeah, here's what I would have done. I would have been okay even knocking Juju off the top 100, considering the down year that he had. And Dupree, I mean, I think he could have been on there, but he could have been lower than 60th on Prisco's list, and I would have put Fitzpatrick and DeCastro on there. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really care that much about this one guy's arbitrary, meaningless list, but, I would have been fine kicking Juju off of it and then definitely putting Minka, and I think definitely still putting DeCastro on that list somewhere, at least in the top 100.
A lot of people probably scratching their head right now saying, who's Pete Prisco? Right. He's obviously been with CBS Sports for a long time and really insignificant as an analyst. I mean, I don't think he watches as much tape as what he claims that he watches, and I don't think when he does watch, he understands what he's looking at half the time. But I guess they accomplished the goal, right?
Got us talking about it.
Got us talking about it, and they ended up, we was glued in on Saturday watching Bryant McFadden had those guys on, and here we are talking about, kind of a follow-up off-season interview. So I guess they did their job. It just some of the media analysis, man. To me, it's never been worse on a national level. When it comes to the NFL.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot out there you kind of shake your head at, and that was one of them. More relevant and meaningful, I think, information that Minka talked about in the interview with Brian McFadden was just a difference in how Miami used him and how Pittsburgh used him. Basically, Fitzpatrick described that Miami under Brian Flores wanted to use Fitzpatrick like Patrick Chung. Flores from New England wanted to use Fitzpatrick as that kind of box safety, real close to the line of scrimmage type of guy, and that just wasn't where Fitzpatrick thought his skill set was at, basically playing a linebacker type role. It comes to Pittsburgh, and like immediately we're playing you in free safety, play in the post, and just go out there and be a ball hawk. And that was a big difference between the two, something Fitzpatrick's obviously a lot more comfortable doing. So it was interesting to see him kind of compare and contrast in detail how Miami wanted to use him arguably incorrectly without Pittsburgh's maximizing his skill set.
Yeah, and he has talked about that a little bit during earlier in the offseason about possibly, and really dating all the way back, I think, to the Pro Bowl, talking about possibly moving around more or needing to move around more, so to make it harder on quarterbacks this year. So look, for him to come in off the street like he did and have to pick up things, he admits that it's not an overly complicated defense, but they still do a lot of things different there. So for him to come in like he did, I mean, right out of the chute too, in that game against San Francisco, really was a difference maker in that game, and really throughout the season. Obviously ended up with his first team All Pro selection there. Really a testament of how the coaching staff not only played to his talents, but how he was able to pick things up overall. And man, you would think, you would be able to do a little bit more with him in his second season, even if that, he might not like it, but he might have to play a little bit more in the box. Sometimes maybe occasionally as a quasi, linebacker even, or in the slot, occasionally as a nickel. You could do so much with that guy because he's so talented. And he admits that, just because he doesn't think that it fits his skill set, doing some of the things that Miami was asking him to do, he can do them. I just think that he was just most of the time he wasn't put into kind of the position that he thought he needed to be in succeeding. I don't think he views himself being above it overall, and I think he knows the importance of him having to move around, especially, a lot of people, the last quarter of that season were going off the stats that you had compiled about how teams weren't targeting going his direction there. So you got to make it harder for the quarterbacks overall in 2020 based on what they saw in 2019, and a lot of being able to do that means having to move Minka around.
Sure. As long as if you're a player, as long as you feel like the team understands how to overall, big picture, use you most effectively, you'll do some of the dirty work and grunt work from time to time, understanding it's for the greater good, and it's for the good of Fitzpatrick too, to get him more involved, because if he's just going to be in the post and teams are going to avoid him, that's not good for him. It's not good for the defense as a whole. So it's not that he's against playing near the line of scrimmage and moving around some. He just wants to know that overall a team has the right plan for him, and that generally speaking he's going to be the free safety as opposed to just being that box Patrick Chung type player every single time, where it's not going to get to use his best abilities really at all, as opposed to Pittsburgh, where he's going to play the majority of the time as free safety, but also move around and wear different hats and expand that role as well.
Right. A lot of times, especially when you're going to go single high, he's going to be your guy.
Right.
But will it be as much as last year? Probably not. And look, that's going to put the big onus on Edmonds, this year. More than likely have to cover some of that back there.
And to be clear, it's not that the two roles are just single high and box quasi linebacker. There can be inversions with Sutton and Hilton, and Fitzpatrick can play more robber stuff from underneath and some zone coverage type stuff, and maybe match up on tight ends a little bit more. So it's not just black and white, play at the line of scrimmage or play deep. There's a ton of middle ground there, literally in that middle 10 to 15 yard range where he can play and make an impact as well. So there's a lot of ways to get him involved, not even just talking about playing close to the line of scrimmage.
And just in some coverage deceptions. I'm always a big fan of how of safeties rotating or moving right before the snap. and being able to disguise something. I think in some certain situations, if you show a quarterback, especially, look, I mean, this team's going to play a lot of younger quarterbacks, right?
Starting with Daniel Jones.
Starting with Daniel Jones. So the more that you can do against some of these younger quarterbacks pre-snap to get them from to seeing ghost, if you will, the better. And I think a lot of that's going to be some pre-snap rotation with your safeties, obviously, because you think one guy's going to be single high in the snap of the football. You either have two deep or the other guys, whether it be inversion or the other safety, single high. You're going to know what quarterbacks are able to process things real quickly.
Right, yeah. Giving them a different post-snap look as opposed to pre-snap to make the quarterback adjust on the fly, make the whole offense adjust on the fly. Receivers have to adjust their routes and what their combinations are going to be, and the quarterback has to adjust what the coverage looks like. And that's why I'm excited for this defense in the secondary specifically to be the exact same, because whenever you added new pieces last year, you kind of had to simplify things for at least a little while because they had to get used to the system, and you couldn't be as creative as you could be. Remember with Terrell Edmonds, his rookie year, the back half of that year, they were a lot more aggressive in their disguises and looks. That first half of the year, they were very static, very vanilla pre and post snap because they just couldn't do a whole lot because Edmonds just wasn't ready to be part of that group and part of all the disguises. And so now that you have this same group, corners and safeties across the board, assuming everyone stays healthy, it'll allow you to be aggressive in disguise out of the gate, where you won't have to wait for these guys to adjust and feel comfortable in the system and add more to their plate. So that tells me that right away they should be doing some of the stuff they were doing last year really effectively.
We saw them, as a season. And look, this is a defense too that defended Lamar Jackson better than any other defense last year.
Absolutely.
So once again, we continue talking about all the guys that they're getting. How good, Alex? How good can this defense be in 2020?
It could be the number one defense. It was right around there, probably. What would you say, number 2, number 3 last year, maybe just behind New England in terms of, best defenses in football. So, yeah, this can be a top defense.
And remember that, the first 2 games, adjusted net yards per passing, they quickly were able to dump what had happened in those first 2 games. Now granted, I don't know how much you can use the excuse, well, they were playing Tom Brady and Russell Wilson. That to some degree, that's it's going to impact.
That's the point.
Yeah, it's going to impact you. I think you would probably expect to have a little bit higher stats, especially in that category there when you're playing those guys. But it was kind of astronomical numbers. I thought a little bit too much on the high side, if you will, against those first 2 teams, and then really over the span of those next 14 games. They really did a good job coming together quickly as a defense overall. And they lost Stephon Tuitt during that. The whole, not that Cameron Kelly was a prime player to lose, but that was something that you were used to working with, that you had to overcome, right?
Mm-hmm. I would say just the difference between the first 2 games and the last 14 was not the quarterback play, but just adding Minka. And you saw a big difference when Minka, obviously the 49ers game made an impact right away.
And really, you didn't do all that much different, from on a week-to-week basis. You didn't, and then that's kind of where we're going with this is you use Minka a little bit more creatively. You have Edmonds now, another year experience. You would hope you get a little something more out of him this upcoming season. You get a guy like Stephon Tuitt back. Bud and TJ coming off of just fantastic seasons. Oh, and what about Devin Bush? You got a full season underneath. That guy will actually understand what he's calling, this year, as well. So, yeah, I think there's reason, going back again to what we just talked about with Mike Clay and all, the expectation should be top 3 defense in the NFL across the board, and would not be surprising if they are the tops.
The good news is,
if they are, if they have the top defense and Ben Roethlisberger is able to limp himself out there for at least 15 games, they're going to win more than 10 games.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, the good news here with this defense, Dave, is just this is not theoretical anymore. For so many years, we tried to say, oh, they look good on paper. If Bud can do this, if this guy can step up, blah 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 blah. It's not theoretical. We saw what this defense can do last year. Most of those guys returned. The only guys you lost were Hargrave and Barron. You're getting Tuitt back as well. You're getting second year Minka in the Steelers system. So we've seen this in action. We've seen it work, and there's every reason to believe it can be just about as good as last year. Will they take away the football as much? That's just going to be statistically hard to do, but they still should be aggressive. A lot of sacks, a lot of turnovers, a lot of pressure, a strength of this team, and then that's something we just have not said in a long time about this defense.
Well, if they have at least 50 sacks and 25 turnovers, they should be fine.
Yep.
Historically, statistically, tells you they should be fine too in that aspect. I guess the only other thing that could really alter that is just home run, too many home runs kind of deal. But you really certainly wouldn't expect this defense to give up those that many big plays this coming season, especially against some of the younger quarterbacks that they're going to be playing overall there. So I think it's fun. I think it's something that we're going to be talking about the rest of the offseason. Here is the prospects of this defense overall, and Minka being a big part of that.
Speaking of home runs, Dave, you looked at the Steelers' offense and maybe the lack of home runs last year. You took a look at their entire deep passing game last year for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I'll let you have the floor here and kind of give me your big takeaways of what happened when this team tried to throw deep.
Yeah, it wasn't good out of the chute either, was it? I think that's the thing that people tend to forget a little bit when looking at this kind of stuff is even right out of the chute, it wasn't great. I'm trying to find out where that post even went to now.
It might be on the second page on Depot now, or the bottom of the first page.
I'm not seeing it all of a sudden here.
I'll send you the link to it.
Okay.
Because I got it pulled up. But yeah, I like that you have a table to receivers' targets too, so I can see what Washington's deep targets numbers were and Deontay and et cetera. So I think you did a good job of visualizing that for me and for the rest of the readers. And poor Johnny Holton, 2-9, or no, it was 0-9, and then with 2 drops. Oh.
Right, and I think even a couple. Okay, thanks for sending that to me. I couldn't find it all. I got blind to the page all of a sudden there. But I think if memory serves me, two of those came again in that game, that debacle against Cleveland there. You know, and one early, and I think obviously one in the end zone down the left hand side there
before the 4th and 1. Debacle, yeah.
Right, and it makes you wonder what kind of how could the complexion of that game had changed, especially if he calls in that deep one in the end zone at that time, because it was still a contested game at that point. Would
that have tied the game? I forget what the score was. I think it would have tied it. Were they down a touchdown?
It feels. I don't know. You're gonna make me pull up the game book on this.
I'm gonna make you pull up the game book. Yeah, I think because wasn't the final of that game 17-10 or 20-10? I mean, it was a one-score game for most of that thing.
What week was that? 11, 12?
What would that have been? I'm not sure.
Oh, okay, week 11 here. And now let me find the deep one.
I think it was a 7-point game. Yeah, and then that was followed up by the 4th and 1. Or Rudolph got skittish in the pocket, threw it at Holton's feet. They turned the ball over. They were like the 30, and that just kind of felt like the game was over at that point.
Okay, he had that. There was that deep 3rd and 12 pass early in the second quarter. Wasn't that the one that Burnett defended? That we thought maybe Holton should have had. That might have been a drop there. And I'm trying to find the other one here real quick that we're talking about here. Incomplete deep left. Let's see, from the 1st and 10 from the Cleveland 41. There was a defensive pass interference on that play. Was that the one that we were thinking about? Because because they ended up scoring on that drive. Okay, it was early in the 4th quarter, I think, from the 41. 1st and 10, Cleveland 41. Rudolph incomplete deep left. And what was the score at that point? It would have been.
I think it was 17-10.
14-7, I think.
14-7. Okay, so still 7-point game. Yeah, so that would have tied the game.
Right. So, and then obviously, Rudolph, the wheels came off even more, and his helmet. From that point forward. But I remember thinking back, breaking down the film of that game, thinking, man, if a couple of those plays to Holton had hit, how would that have changed the complexion of the game? Well, obviously one of those in the end zone would have resulted in points, which was huge. But look, back to kind of the deep passing stats. Boy, Roethlisberger opened up the 2019 season in the first six quarters, not great at all. He attempted 10 deep passes at 20 yards or longer down the field and completed just one of those, with one other being intercepted. Now, one of those incompletions started or was right in the middle of the whole Dante Moncrief drop city in the opener against New England. And I got a great gif of that one. And look, I understand that was a good play by one of the McCourty twins in the end zone on that. But if you slow that thing down and freeze it, that ball's in Moncrief's hands in the end zone before it's ripped out. Receivers are paid to come down with that catch there. Right. James Washington comes down with that catch, I think, in that situation there. So that was one drop right off the bat there, and obviously the only completion, deep ball completion by Ben on the season was in that game against the Patriots, and it went down the right side, I think, to James Washington there. That's the one where you kind of wonder, could Washington have stayed in bounds on that one? And made it in the end zone. But moving forward, obviously Ben hurt by halftime in the second game against Seattle. Mason Rudolph came in, and while he played the rest of the season, we have him down. And props, by the way, to Matthew Marksey and you guys on the charting, because our charting system makes it so easy to kind of go back and just pull these things up here. Mason was 9 of 37 on the season for 311 yards and 4 touchdowns and an interception on his deep throws of 20 yards or longer down the field. 2 of those incompletions were drops, with Johnny Holton be responsible for 1 of those. 7 of those Rudolph incompleted deep throws that included his lone interception came in the Steelers' Week 11 Thursday night game loss to the Browns. So that's really when the wheels came completely off in that game, obviously with Rudolph. Now, 3 of Rudolph's 4 deep passes for touchdowns in 2019 went to Deontay Johnson. That's a good sign overall, I think, especially when you're talking about Deontay Johnson. For a rookie, predominantly playing kind of the X, for him to have 3 ultra-deep receptions as a rookie, I think that speaks a lot to his versatility.
Sure, yeah. I think you have some good numbers there for Deontay, even some decent numbers for Washington, and Juju was actually fairly effective as well, deep ball. Just looking at the overall numbers here, just there weren't any situational secondary deep threats that stepped up. Holton, Moncrief, Kane, I guess Kane a little bit, but Jones, Jalen Samuels, Vance McDonald, like just never hit on really any of those guys. It all had to come from your top 3, and Juju obviously missed or was hurt a good chunk of the season. So you just didn't have that situational guy step up. So someone like Claypool can maybe be that guy where he's not going to catch 50 passes this year, but if he catches 20 of them and 6 of them are of the deep ball variety, then that's that kind of supplemental deep threat that this offense has really been lacking for a little while now, and especially last year.
Well, now we know why Johnny Holton's out of a job, right?
Right.
In Pittsburgh during the offseason right away there, right?
Because, I mean, what are the numbers for everyone not named Washington, Johnson, and Smith-Schuster? They're like 3 for, what would that be, 12, 16, 18, like 3 for 20 and 3 interceptions. So they had as many receptions as they had interceptions.
Right.
I mean, just terrible stuff. And again, quarterback play is partly to be blamed on that, but it's certainly not all the reason to be blamed on that. I mean,
right. Yeah, and look, I mean, you had a lot of moving pieces in there too. Not the overall. It doesn't take away from the fact that they needed to do a better job of their deep passes last season. But I mean, you got all those. I mean, let's face it, Johnny Holton. I mean, is he ever going to get the kind of snaps that he got in Pittsburgh last year throughout, for the rest of his career? Probably not.
No. I mean, same with Moncrief. I mean, Moncrief's probably outdone in his career.
Right. What about Tevin Jones in his career?
Yeah.
Obviously
he's in Dallas still.
Yeah, obviously he didn't play a lot anyway. But I mean, a lot of those guys don't belong seeing considerable playing time in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously too. I mean, don't forget. I mean, Juju missed. How many games did Juju miss in the middle of that?
A couple, and he wasn't healthy for some of them either. He was playing through a lot of pain. Yeah, looking at the stats here, just compiling them in my head. Again, deep balls to receivers is not named Washington, Johnson, or Smith-Schuster. The Steelers were 3 of 20 with 3 drops and 4 interceptions.
Wow,
I mean, you just
brutal.
can't get worse than that. So you got a Claypool in that, maybe Deion Kane, year 2 for him. You get some other deep threat options aside from your top 3. That's going to make this whole offense just a little bit more complete.
Exactly, and I think bright spots by compiling the actual receiver end of it here. James Washington with 8 deep ball receptions. Couple of beautiful ones from Duck, right? Remember the game? And I think weren't those against Cleveland too? One down the left side that got dropped right in the bucket down the sideline there, and then obviously the catch in the end zone that he made. Was that against Cleveland or Cincinnati?
I think Cincinnati.
Maybe that was Cincinnati, but great catches by him. And look, that's the reason why you brought this guy in, right? To make those kind of easy catches, in the bucket catches down the side, and also kind of the contested catches as well too. So he led the team with 8 deep ball receptions last year, and once again, as I mentioned, Deontay had 5, and 3 of those resulted in touchdowns, and that's without basically playing a lick without Roethlisberger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at least there's some comfort in those guys. The guys that'll be back, you'll be your starters. And then again, you add some situational guys, Ebron, Claypool, Vance hopefully can make a little more of an impact this year. Maybe even a Mcfarland on the wiggle route that you've talked about. I think you'll have much better success. And of course, Ben will be throwing it to him as well.
Right, and you would hope Ben. And look, I mean, Ben technically, I think even going back to, was it the first half of 2018?
The bad Wi-Fi stuff.
Yeah, he wasn't great with the deep ball in the first half of that season.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously, I mean, it couldn't have been as bad during the second half. But I thought there were times even in the second half where I thought maybe he could have put it out there a little bit more. So maybe with this, maybe the bionics will kick in. And yeah. Oh, did you see that the Miami of Ohio Twitter account posted it just recently? About that kind of that Hail Mary pass that Roethlisberger threw.
Where he got his nickname?
What? Where
he got his nickname.
No. Or was that? Are we talking about the same play?
I'm not sure what. I don't think I saw it. I just know that Big Ben, I think, at least if I'm remembering the lore correctly, he got the name Big Ben in part for completing a Hail Mary in high school, and that's kind of what made him known.
Okay, I was talking about the one at Miami.
Oh, at Miami. Okay,
right.
My bad. I didn't hear you right.
Anyway,
no, I don't think I saw it.
Search that one out. He threw that football something like 65 in the air, I think, on that play. Stepped into it and really let it fly there. But I mean, look,
was that to win the game, or was that the end of half?
I don't remember the situation. You'll have to. It's easy to find. It's been within the last week, I think. In fact, I'll give it to you. I just found it here. I'm going to DM it back to you
let me watch
it here.
Yeah. So I could use some Big Ben highlights right now.
There you go. Yeah.
2020.
2001 game against Akron.
Yeah, this was to beat. To beat Akron. 70-yard touchdown. Does it get caught before? It gets caught around, the 5? Oh, a tip. Nice.
Yeah, but it
That's
gets
awesome.
hit about the 5, and where does he let that thing loose at?
They do that camera cut. Oh, audio.
Go back and watch the replay where he lets this thing go from, because it comes down at about the 5, right?
Yeah, it comes down around the 5. He throws it at the 26 or 27, it looks like.
So what's the math there?
Oh, God.
45 and 24? 69, right? Is that right?
Yeah. Call it right about 70 yards.
All right, so there you go. Anyway, I thought that was worth. It was good to see that highlight. This, obviously you don't expect him to throw 70-yard passes very often, but you should be able to get it out there. But overall, the biggest takeaway I thought was, and it was a Captain Obvious one, is the fact that this team just didn't have the deep passing game last season, really right from the get-go there. So if that improves, you're going to have more explosive plays, eat up more chunks of grass along the line. And look, we all know the value of explosive plays in the NFL, and they need more of those this upcoming season.
Need more big plays, need fewer runs on 2nd and 10. The bane of your existence, Dave. I did the study the other day. And again, I understand the context here, but the Steelers tied for 7th in teams most likely to run the ball on 2nd and 10 plus at 34.1% of the time. I understand why they opted for that because of the quarterback play, but the counter argument I would offer is running on 2nd and long almost guarantees you're in 3rd and long, and then you're throwing in 3rd long with your subpar quarterback play. It doesn't really make the situation a whole lot better.
Yeah, when you're asking those young inexperienced quarterbacks to keep trying to do something on 3rd and long situations, you're asking for it. You know?
And they weren't effective running either. They were like 20th in yards per carry running on 2nd and 10 plus. So don't think it was out of an abundance of effectiveness either. It was not.
Right. So we could, yeah, definitely the heartburn factor could do with lesser number of 2nd and long runs.
The good news is, I mean, under Ben, the last 3 years, it's averaged around 30%, including, I think, 23.4% in 2018. So, again, Ben's going to cure so many ills of this offense, assuming that he's in relatively the same form. So, to get a lot of context there, but I did want to point that out because I thought that number was interesting. All right, Dave, I think that's everything we had to talk about. We can get to some emails and close out the show.
All right. We actually had a lot to talk about today, didn't we? Huh.
You always find a way, Dave. We're like life finds a way.
Yeah. Let's see here if we go over what L.K. McCrae writes in. All right. Hello, Dave and Alex. First-time emailer, long-time listener. LK, thanks for writing in. Many of my friends and family began listening to your podcast after I told them you had the best Steelers information and analysis on the web. I still don't know how you guys managed to find topics to talk about year-round, but you do a great job. I don't know how we do it either, but what looks like 35-minute shows turn into hour and 15-minute shows or hour and 30-minute shows sometimes. I was in a very spirited debate with a Jets fan on another forum a while back, and his opinion was that no African-American head coach in the league deserved his job, and they were all hired because of the Rooney Rule. He did give Tomlin credit for being the best of the lot. As a veteran who happens to be African-American, it was very difficult to hear that sometimes that someone believed these men who have played by the rules, paid their dues, and rose to the ranks were not deserving of a chance to be head coach. I've seen other head coaches hired with lesser resumes never win and be rehired as head coach again. I have never heard anyone say they didn't deserve a chance. My feeling is the change to the Rooney Rule that was tabled is not a good idea. It will only give more ammunition to anybody who thinks like the Jets fan does. He goes on to say the Rooney Rule has become a farce. Teams talk about who they are going to hire before they go through this process and hire who they wanted to in the first place. It has not done what it was intended to do, which increased minority hires. My question to the owners would be, why not hire the best candidate? And really that's what it should come down to. Regardless of race, color, or creed, I often wonder if owners are worried about how their fans will react to the minority hire. I vividly remember the vitriol that was hurled at Coach Tomlin on Pittsburgh Talk Radio before he coached one game in the NFL. Yeah, I kind of remember that as well, too. I don't have the answers. The goal should be to increase the opportunity to interview as many candidates as possible until you find the one who will give you the franchise the best chance to win. I do, however, appreciate you guys being thoroughly non-rhythmic and talking about the issue in a clear and intelligent manner. Just want to give my 2 cents on the issue. Look, I wish I had the perfect solution to this. I mean, and really, it goes outside of football, right? I mean, it's in everyday society. The best person, for any job, regardless of race or color or creed, should be that person. As far as the NFL goes, I don't have the answer, but I think Alex agreed with me as well too. I don't think rewarding teams in any capacity for a minority hire is the way to go with this either. I do like that more need to be interviewed. Look, I mean, as the story goes, Mike Tomlin's interview, if you believe the story, is what sold the Steelers on him.
Remember, they didn't have to interview Mike Tomlin either. They had already interviewed Ron Rivera. They had satisfied the minority rule when they hired Coach Tomlin. So they didn't have to do that. Yeah, I'm with you. I to the point of the reader. The concern is if you have this incentive and coaches get hired because of it, they're always going to be wondering, well, did this coach get hired just for the incentive? And that's not what you want to do. You want to make sure you hire somebody, and there's no question about if a team thought that he was the best guy or not. How do you just create more opportunities for those guys to have that chance to get interviewed is the bigger question. And that conversation you had with that Jets fan, I mean, that dude just racist. I mean, I don't know. Mike Tomlin, Tony Dungy, Lovie Smith. I mean, are you kidding me? So pay no mind to what that racist Jets fan's saying.
Yeah, I wish I had the perfect. I think this is something though that that we're going to be talking about for years to come. It's always going to be probably not enough minority coaches being hired.
Yeah, I just want to get to the root of why that is, and I don't have the answers to that. Obviously, we're not going to be able to uncover all that in the remainder of our podcast or any podcast today.
Here's the flip side too, and he kind of hit on this. I think once a team has why do teams generally have an opening? Because they fired the guy that had the spot, right? Sure. Okay. Yep. And usually that firing happens towards the end of the season or immediately after the season there. And then obviously other teams that just did the same thing, are, especially if there's a big name out there, that's going to be the guy that instantly probably, a retread as opposed to someone younger in the ranks, is generally what's going to happen there. If it's obviously a white coach that recently got fired and is going to be the highest profile guy, those are generally the guys that are going to get the jobs first, right?
Right. There's a fraternity issue in coaches where it is a lot of the same names getting recycled, but there are obviously new coaches getting hired as well. And how many new coaches this year got hired? Joe Judge and Kevin Stefanski and some other guys I'm probably forgetting. I mean, I obviously what most teams look for, most teams hire offensive coaches in football, right? Offense is what sells. Offensive coordinators get hired probably more than defensive coordinators. And I would say there's more, and again, I don't know what the reason is for this, but a lot of offensive coordinators are white. A lot of quarterback coaches are white. And those are the guys that ultimately end up getting probably the best chance to get promoted to offensive coordinator, get promoted to head coach and stuff like that. So I think there's an issue there to be looked at. I don't have the answers for that. This is a deep-seated issue that is way above my intelligence and the time we have in this podcast. But those are the things I would look for a little bit more than trying to just, as you said, incentivize teams to hire a minority coach.
Yeah, I don't think you're if I was a minority too, personally, I would be offended by them trying to technically,
And we've seen that reaction from Anthony Lynn. I think Tony Dungy have both said this is a bad idea.
Right.
I think Marvin Lewis has said the same. So Marvin Lewis, another great, minority coach. So yeah, again, I think there are obviously some big issues there, but I don't think the draft pick thing is the right way to go about it.
All right, greetings from Sweden. This one's from Marcus here, lives in Sweden. I agree with you guys that suggested rule changes of being rewarded draft picks for hiring a minority is wrong. It's even kind of discriminatory since it suggests that a person of a minority is worth less than a non-minority person given the package deal of extra draft picks. I think diversity is good and that you should strive for it, but I don't like forced diversity like hire X percent women or this, in my opinion, ridiculous compensation of draft picks is good at all. Mediocrity for all. Disclaimer, I'm a middle-aged, heterosexual, Caucasian, high-income man. Regarding Juju's skills, it definitely helped Juju having AB double covered on a lot of plays, but every wide receiver is going to only be as good as his quarterback when healthy. With a healthy Ben, I think Juju will thrive this season. Yeah, Marcus. I mean, it's hard to see Juju not bounce back this year.
Yeah. I know a lot of people say, oh, well, he's not the number one. He didn't have AB last year. Maybe that ends up being true, but last year there were so many other issues. Bad quarterback play, his own injury. You really can't blame any one sole factor. So this year is going to be huge for Juju.
Ted writes in, maybe I'm in the minority, but I say we don't need to draft a quarterback until Ben is officially done. If that's after next year or say after next 2 years, he's feeling good, maybe plays another. This will give you all the time to see Mason, and why waste a draft pick over the next year or two on a quarterback while in win now mode. I say when Ben officially retires, take like half the money you were paying him, say less than $15 million, get a veteran free agent, and also draft a quarterback then. Maybe I'm not thinking clearly, but I like that option. Look, Ted, I can see it working out that way. If I were a betting man right now, this moment, I would bet you that the Steelers are not going to draft a quarterback with their first 2 picks in 2021 from where I sit right now. Now, could my opinion change on that? Yeah, absolutely, it could. But I don't see them drafting a quarterback, at least in the first couple rounds here. At least not next year. Maybe 2022 is different.
Again, I'll just repeat what I've said before. I think a lot of it's tethered to what Rudolph does this summer and their confidence in him. It's unpredictable for the draft. Depends on class. Depends on underneath. Depends on Ben's health and play and all those factors. So we're all kind of guessing right now. But I think a lot of it's tied to how Mason looks.
Chris Bailey writes back in, hi, Dave and Alex. Thanks for answering my previous question about why Scotty, talking about Christian Scotland Williamson, wasn't on your predicted 53-man squads. I wasn't aware that the International Player Program was a 2-year limit for any one player. With you providing that key piece of information, all makes sense now. Real quick on that, it doesn't mean that Scotty can't still make the practice squad in a normal setting, or the 53, or 55, whatever you want to call it, roster this year. It just means that exception has gone away for the practice squad, for them being able to carry the 11th guy, And part of the rules with them carrying that 11th, having that practice squad exception, was once Scotty got that designation, he had to stick on the practice squad all year. Correct, Alex? Was that correct? The interpretation?
Yes, once he was used as that accepted guy, he couldn't then be promoted to the active roster, or if he was, he would have to be, used as that exemption would go away permanently. That way, this team couldn't have an unfair advantage of having an extra spot on the practice squad.
Right, and I think that program comes with 2 years with that exception there. So that doesn't mean, and maybe Chris just understanding, or maybe I did a bad job of explaining, but if he's he's obviously still on the off-season roster here. If he performs well and ends up, there's no rule that says he can't make the practice squad again, or he can't make the 53 or 55 man roster this year. It's just that exception goes away. I think the argument that Alex and I have of why he's not on any of our rosters so far, not even a practice squad, is really we kind of think that maybe that's going to just I haven't seen enough of him yet in game time to have the confidence that he's going to make the practice squad. Could that change? Absolutely. I really think it's going to be tough for him to make the 53-man roster. I think that's I think something has to happen along the injury line or something else happen for him to make the regular roster. Now, when it comes to practice squad, I'm not going to say it's impossible, as I like to say, but I kind of doubt it right now.
Yeah, he's just got to be a lot of acceleration. It's got to happen really quickly for him. Now, there was a pretty noticeable jump last year, as you would expect, from his first year in football to his second year, but it still probably wasn't enough. Now, the good thing for him is that while the exception is gone, he's just a normal player. Now, there are 12 practice squad spots available for him, so there are more opportunities for these guys to make it. But Kevin Rader, this team seems to like him. They've carried him for a little bit. He's probably a better blocker right now, so it's just going to be a tougher path, but not impossible.
What was the second part of his email here? It says, as you did such a good job answering that question, I have another one. As the amount of off-season team training is likely to be reduced for all teams, how likely is it that teams will play in similar styles and packages to last season? And is there any merit in looking more closely at the tape of last season for tendencies this year compared to previous years? Would changes at head coach or quarterback mean the tendencies are likely to change for those teams? Here's the thing about that. A, you always want to be self-scouting yourself. And B, these new head coaches and new staffs are probably going to want to come in, even with a virtual offseason, and implement in some things that they really like to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's still going to be that element. If you're a new coaching staff, you can't carry over last year's stuff because you weren't the new coach as part of last year, and the coaching staff is probably pretty different as well. For teams that are already established, teams like Pittsburgh, it's going to be a lot of the same. But there's still going to be obviously a new flair and flavor and a little, wrinkles added. So it's hard to say. It could vary team to team. I mean, Steelers a more veteran team, might be easier to add newer stuff than a team with a new coaching staff or a team that has a lot of rookies, a lot of new faces, a lot of roster turnover. So it could vary from club to club.
And look, I think this is just yet another reason why the Steelers will have a little bit of an advantage. Continuity of the coach's staff, mostly veteran team on both sides of the ball. Finally, Chris is over the pond from England there. He says, finally, is your Monday evening live chat available as a download? I live in England, so it starts at midnight for me. As I'm lucky enough to not have Dave's skill to avoid sleep, I never get to hear it. It always goes up on the site the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
and it does get archived on YouTube as well. But it's up there right now. So you go to Steelers Depot, scroll down a little bit, you'll find Q&A live stream. The archive is listed there.
We had a heck of a turnout in one last night, didn't we?
Yeah, we had up to, I think, 80 people at one point. So thanks everybody who came out. I appreciate it.
This one from Pastor Joe Green, Juju stats versus AB stats. David and Alex, longtime listener, I love the show and your work. Hear me out. I listen so much about how terrible Juju was last year. I think it deserves a deeper dive. Injury was a major problem for Juju last year. However, I think the absence of Big Ben was by far a larger contributor to a mediocre season. Most Steelers fans concede that AB is the gold standard that modern Steelers wide receivers are compared to. With that being said, how did AB stats compare in games when Big Ben was out? I'm thinking October 2015 by memory when placed against his normal stats. I'm wagering lunch that AB did not fare well either. Look, I mean, remember him throwing his hands up in that game against Arizona?
Vic was not great. He did not do a good job of getting the ball.
Right, and really, he some bad throws from Landry Jones along the way as well too. So yeah, I mean, look, Pastor Joe Green, you don't have to twist our arms on this. Here's the question: is Juju? Juju, we would hope would at least be able to return to 80 to 90 receptions in 2020. Correct? I mean that should be the expectations, right, Alex?
Yes.
Now the second part is can he show that he's an elite level top 10 receiver in the league? That's kind of really the only question there is about Juju is, can he establish himself as that go-to, top 10 guy that puts fears in opposing defenses around the league? That's the big question.
Yeah, I think it's possible for him to do that. Like I said, I think he's going to have a big bounce back year. I don't know the exact numbers of how that's going to look, but I think fans this 2020 will look a lot more like 2018 than it did 2019.
You want a good example of what he can do. Just go back and watch a couple seasons ago, that couple of those catches that he made with Big Ben in it. The game against the Jaguars down the left-hand side of the field. I mean,
yeah. I think it's Ramsey or Boye, or a great catch on that left side.
Right, AJ Boye, I think. And then the game against the Patriots down the right-hand side. Against that younger cornerback, name escaping me there. Jackson, was it Jackson?
J.C. Jackson.
John Jackson. That sounds familiar. But anyway, I mean, that was a great catch down the sideline. I mean, he's got the ability. I mean, the only question, like I said, once again, when it comes to Juju in 2020. At least from my end, I expect him at least to have 80 to 90 receptions again. My question is can he establish himself as that kind of guy, a top 10 kind of receiver in the league? Do I think it's possible? Yeah, but that's going to be the onus on him, and that's probably why you're going to have the detractors from Juju say what they're saying right now. Now, do I think he's do I go along with some of these people that have Juju overrated? No. But I think he's got to prove from the aspect that he can be kind of that top 10 wide receiver in 2020.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, the dude's got 2 97 career yard touchdowns, and he's 23 years old. So we know this guy can make big plays. Let's just get him healthy, get Ben healthy, and see what happens. I think he'll have a big bounce back here.
Let's see. He goes on to say, P.S. I love your no ad option on the site. Keep up the great work. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've got a lot of good feedback for that. So $25 for the whole year, I think it's well worth it.
I think that's got him, Alex. I think we got through them all here. So good questions there once again. And if you have one you want us to answer and talk about on the show, send it to theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If we don't get it in a couple of shows, you might want to resend it again. Sometimes, depending on how many we have, don't make it all the way through. Some of them just get lost, shuffled down to the bottom of the email machine that I don't get to either. So, Alex, do you have anything left for us on this Tuesday?
No, we will be back on Friday. Yeah, be sure to keep sending in those questions. We'll find something to talk about. And, everyone stay safe and hope you're doing well.
All right. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter @Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter @Alex_Kozora. Follow the show @Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and you want to donate to the cause, please go to Steelers Depot and hit the upright navigational bar for the donate button there. And then also, if you'd like an ad-free version of the site, that's available in the upright navigational bar as well, too. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.